Hello everyone. Picking up where we left off last time, I would like to take a look at land use regulations in Japan. In the last issue, we looked at development regulations, which are rules about whether or not land can be developed, and use regulations, which are rules about how land can be used. This time, let's take a look at the form regulations, which affect the shape of the buildings that can be built on the land. The most common form regulations are floor area ratio restrictions, building coverage ratio restrictions, and diagonal restrictions. The floor area ratio is calculated by dividing the total floor area of the building by the lot area. Therefore, the floor area ratio restrictions determines what percentage of the lot area is allowed for the total floor area. The building coverage ratio is calculated by dividing the building area by the lot area. It limits how much of the lot area can be covered by buildings. Diagonal restrictions limit the height of a building by the boundary line with the neighboring lot in the front street. What is the purpose of each regulation? The purpose of the floor area ratio restriction is to limit the burden on the so-called social infrastructure, including roads, water and sewer systems. If the city becomes too dense, roads may become congested at any time, and water and sewer systems may not have sufficient capacity. Building coverage ratio restrictions are intended to prevent adverse effects on sunlight, lighting, ventilation, and neighborhood privacy, as well as to prevent the spread of fire. If a 100% building coverage ratio is allowed because the land is expensive and you want to make the most efficient use of it, the building will be attached to the building on the neighboring lot, right? Diagonal restrictions are intended to prevent adverse effects on sunlight, lighting, ventilation, etc. in the neighborhood. As you walk around town, you may see the upper floors of a building cut at an angle, and unless it is a design feature, it is considered to be affected by the diagonal restrictions. Form regulations are linked to the use districts we saw in the previous video. For example, if a large floor area ratio were allowed in a low-rise residential district, the building would no longer be low-rise, so the floor area ratio would be kept low. In some commercial districts, floor area ratios as high as 1300% are allowed. Since the purpose of the floor area ratio restriction was to adjust the load on social infrastructure, there are also floor area ratio restrictions based on the width of the street in front of the building. For example, if the front street width in a residential area is 4 meters, the floor area ratio is limited to 160%. The stricter of the two standards is applied in conjunction with the use district's restrictions. Let us look at these land use regulations from an economics perspective. The rationale for use restrictions to avoid a mix of uses is that noise and air pollution from factories, congestion in commercial areas, and public safety issues can have a negative impact on the living environment. In economics terms, this can be seen as a problem of external diseconomies. This is a situation in which the economic activities of a particular business or individual have an impact on other businesses or individuals, and this impact occurs outside of market transactions. For example, if noise is generated when parts are cut in a factory, noise guarantees are not taken into account when parts are traded. The purpose of the floor area ratio restriction is also to avoid congestion of social infrastructure, which is another typical problem of external diseconomies. Buying a house, renting an office, or engaging in other economic activities does not include payments for infrastructure congestion and reduced social efficiency. Whether regulation is the best way to deal with external diseconomies should be considered, as there are other ways to deal with external diseconomies, such as taxation, subsidies, and negotiation between parties. It is also necessary to consider the fact that the introduction of regulations can reduce external diseconomies in exchange for a decrease in the efficiency of land use. It would be ideal if regulations were introduced after a quantitative assessment of which of these is greater, using data according to individual circumstances. I would like to present a research paper that suggests the importance of this point. It is the paper by Dr. Hata and Dr. Corrado. In this paper, a simulation analysis of the effect of relaxing floor area ratio restrictions in Tokyo's Chiyoda ward is conducted. It is estimated that relaxing the floor area ratio restrictions will increase office productivity and generate an annual benefit of approximately 649.2 billion yen in monetary terms. On the other hand, relaxing the floor area ratio limit will increase road traffic, which is estimated to cause an annual loss of about 69.2 billion yen. While it is true that floor area ratio restrictions reduce road congestion, it seems necessary to look at the losses caused by such restrictions as well. In the previous and current videos, we have looked at land use regulations in Japan. We need to think about how to use our own land effectively and how to develop cities in an era of declining population. Thanks for watching.